Before this recording begins, I need to tell you why it exists. Somewhere recently, you closed your eyes, you built a scene, you felt it completely, and when you opened your eyes, nothing had changed. And you wondered, quietly, if it worked for everyone except you. This chapter of The Invisible Prison was written for that exact night. It is not motivation, it is a manual. In the next 80 minutes, you will learn why every request you ever made was answered exactly as asked, and why everything obeys the moment you stop asking for it. Turn the lights down. Close the door. The court is now in session.
You did everything right. You closed your eyes. You built the scene the way the books told you to. The congratulations, the phone call, the weight of the keys in your hand. You felt it, really felt it. Warmth spreading through your chest, like something had finally clicked into place. And then you opened your eyes. The same ceiling. The same water stain in the corner. The same phone with no notifications, face down on the same unpaid bill. Gravity pressed you into the mattress like a hand that had been waiting for you to finish. And something in you flinched, quietly. You didn't even give it words. But if you had, the words would have been these. Maybe I did it wrong. Maybe it doesn't work for me. That flinch is why you are here, not curiosity. The flinch. This chapter of the manual was written for the one who practiced, who believed, who assumed and imagined and persisted, and who still woke up inside the same gray morning. The one who is starting to suspect, in a place they don't say out loud, that they are the exception. The one the law skips. You are not the exception, but you have been standing in the wrong place in the room. All your life. There is a courtroom inside reality. Every mind that has ever wanted anything stands somewhere in that room. And you, like almost everyone breathing, were taught to stand in the gallery. Hands folded, voice lowered, waiting to be called on by a bench that has been empty the entire time. Tonight, you find out who that seat belongs to. Chapter 1, The Night It Didn't Work. Let's go back to that night. Not to shame you, to examine the evidence, because something real happened in that bed, and the sleeping world has no language for it. Your friends would call it wishful thinking. A therapist might call it visualization. The algorithm would sell you another meditation for it by morning. None of them saw what actually occurred. You constructed a state of consciousness, brick by brick, sense by sense. You are the only species in the known universe that can sit inside a body in one reality and build a second one behind its eyes. That is not a hobby. That is the operant power doing the only thing it was ever designed to do. And then, in the last 3 seconds, you destroyed it. Not with doubt. Doubt is too crude a word for what you did. You destroyed it with a posture. In the final moment, as the scene dissolved and the dark of your eyelids returned, some deep muscle in you leaned forward, looked up at the ceiling, and checked. Did it take? 3 words. You never spoke them. You barely thought them. But your whole body asked them, the way a child holds up a drawing and watches the parent's face. And in that single gesture, you told reality exactly what you believed about the chain of command. You told it that the scene you built was a submission, an application, something that required approval from a desk higher than yours. Feel how familiar that gesture is. You have been making it your entire life. You made it at 5 years old, watching an adult's face to learn whether you were good. You made it at 11, hand in the air, waiting for permission to speak. You made it in every waiting room, every interview, every prayer you were ever taught. Palms together, head down, please. The architecture trained that posture into your spine before you could read. School trained it. Religion trained it. Employment trained it. Even your love was trained into it, waiting to be chosen, hoping to be kept. Every institution of the gray architecture runs on the same single assumption. Installed so early, you mistake it for your personality. The assumption that the authority is elsewhere. So of course it followed you into the one place it should never have entered. The imagination. The throne room itself. You walked into the seat of creation, carrying the manners of a petitioner, and you knelt in front of your own furniture. And here is the cruelty of it. The books you read were telling the truth. The law is real. Assumption hardens into fact. Consciousness is the only cause. But they handed the law to a mind still wearing the gallery's posture. And so you did the only thing that posture knows how to do. You took the crown they described, and you held it up toward the ceiling, and you asked if you were allowed. The silence that came back was not rejection. It was a mirror. Nothing answered because nothing up there answers. There is no desk above yours. There has never been a clerk behind the sky, taking applications, weighing your worthiness, stamping some scenes approved and losing others in the mail. The bench you kept glancing at, the one you dressed in the robes of God or the universe or fate or luck, has been vacant since before your first breath. That is the fact your flinch has been protecting you from. Not that the law failed you, that no one was ever listening, because the listener was always you. Sit with the vertigo of that. Don't rush past it. Every unanswered night, every ceiling you stared at, every sign you begged for and half received. All of it was a conversation with your own reflection, conducted in a voice you had been taught did not belong to you. The question was never whether the law works. The law was working that night, flawlessly, with the same indifference as gravity. It reflected your dominant state with perfect fidelity. You assumed the wish for 30 seconds, and you assumed the waiting for 30 years. The mirror doesn't negotiate over volume. It reproduces the loudest signal in the room, and the loudest signal in you, under the visualization, under the warm chest and the imagined keys, was the oldest one. The hand in the air, the face turned upward, the please. So no, you didn't fail at the practice. You succeeded perfectly at a different practice than you thought you were doing. You have been manifesting all along, every single day, without one missed session. You manifested the gallery. You manifested the velvet rope. You manifested a universe that keeps you waiting, because waiting was the deepest scene you ever rehearsed. And that ends tonight. Not with a better technique, not with a louder affirmation, God, no. With something colder and far more final, with a change of seats. But before you can take the bench, you have to see the exact mechanism that has been sabotaging every assumption you ever held. It is small. It is almost invisible. It hides inside the very sentence you call your faith. It is a question mark, and it has been bleeding you dry since you were a child. Chapter 2. The hidden question mark. Every belief you have ever held has a punctuation mark at the end of it. You can't see it. It doesn't appear when you speak, but reality reads it every time, the way a lawyer reads the fine print you skipped. And the difference between the life you have and the life you built behind your eyes comes down to a single character at the end of a single silent sentence. A period, or a question mark. Say the sentence most seekers call their faith. I am wealthy. Sounds like a statement. Grammatically, it is one. But grammar is the costume, not the body. Underneath the words, in the place where reality does its reading, the sentence actually runs like this. I am wealthy, right? Please let this be true. Please work this time. Please. There it is. The malfunction. Not your lack of discipline, not your childhood wounds, not your karma, not the retrograde of some indifferent planet. A question mark, buried like a splinter inside your declaration, turning every command you ever issued into a request the moment it left the throne. And a request, no matter how beautifully worded, carries its own confession inside it. Listen to what asking actually says. When you ask for something, you announce 3 facts to the mirror: that you do not have it, that someone other than you decides, and that the decision could go either way. The mirror, being a mirror, reflects all 3, faithfully, forever. This is why the man who begs for money stays broke, with a precision that looks almost designed. It is designed. He designed it. His prayer is a blueprint of lack, notarized nightly, and the gray architecture builds exactly what the blueprint specifies. Not the money, the begging. The architecture doesn't punish him, it obeys him. It has never done anything else. Neville Goddard wrote that in 1939 in a book thin enough to read in an hour and dangerous enough that almost no one who reads it survives it with their old self intact. Claiming rather than begging. He put the entire mechanism in 5 words, and the world did what the world does with dangerous sentences. It turned him into a poster. It quoted him over sunsets. It filed the razor blade under inspiration, but read the sentence again coldly, like a coroner. He is not describing 2 intensities of the same act. He is describing 2 different species. The beggar and the claimant are not on a spectrum. They stand in different rooms. One waits at the counter of reality. The other owns the building. And your tradition knew this. Before it was sanded down into something safe for Sunday mornings, the oldest instruction in the book was never ask nicely. Listen to the actual grammar of Genesis. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. No address at the top, no signature at the bottom, no if it be thy will. The Latin renders it in 2 words. Fiat lux. Let it be done. Fiat, the same word we still use for an unquestionable decree, the same word stamped into the money in your pocket, which is worth something for exactly one reason. Because an authority declared it, once, and never asked the paper's opinion. Creation, in the oldest text your civilization owns, is not a negotiation. It is an utterance from a speaker who does not glance upward afterward to check whether it took. The light does not receive a request. The light receives a ruling. And the book you were handed as a child says, in a verse your church skipped, thou shalt also decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee. Decree, not petition. The word choice is not decoration. It is the entire teaching, hidden in plain sight for 3,000 years, waiting for a reader whose spine had not yet been bent into the gallery's bow. Now bring it back to that night in your bed. The scene you built was flawless. The feeling was real. And at the end of it, your oldest muscle reached up and attached a question mark, and the question mark did what question marks do. It transferred jurisdiction. It handed the case to a higher court, and there is no higher court. So the case went nowhere. It sat in an empty mailbox in the sky, returned to sender, marked with the only stamp the void ever uses. Answered as asked. You asked with a question mark, and reality answered with uncertainty. You asked as someone waiting, and reality answered with more waiting. Every prayer was answered. That's the horror of it. Every single one, verbatim, including the parts you didn't know you were saying. So here is where you stand, at the 11-minute mark of this manuscript, holding 2 facts that do not yet fit together. The law works with perfect fidelity, and your faith has a splinter in it that turns every command into a plea. The next question is the one that changes the temperature of the room. Who taught you to plead? Who benefits from a world of 7 billion creators standing in a gallery, hands raised, waiting to be called on? Because the posture wasn't an accident. It has a name. And so does the one you become the moment you drop it. 2 figures, 1 choice. Everything you have ever wanted sits on the far side of telling them apart. Chapter 3. The Orphan. Look at the first figure. Look carefully, because you have worn this body. The manual calls him the orphan, not as an insult, as an anatomy. An orphan, in the oldest sense, is someone whose source is elsewhere. Someone whose provision, whose permission, whose name comes from a hand that is not their own. The orphan is not defined by what he lacks. He is defined by where he believes the supply is kept. Somewhere else. Behind a desk. Above the clouds. Inside someone else's decision. And before you feel contempt for him, understand this. The orphan was not born. He was built. He was the smartest possible response to your first 10 years on this planet, when the supply really was elsewhere. Food came from taller people. Warmth came from taller people. Your own name arrived from outside you, printed on a certificate you never signed. Asking was not weakness then. Asking was the technology of survival. Every cell in your small body learned it, rehearsed it, perfected it. The tragedy is not that you learned to ask. The tragedy is that nobody ever told you the lesson had an expiration date. So the child grew, and the posture stayed. The taller people were replaced by employers. The dinner table became a salary. The parent's face became the boss's face, the bank's face, the government's letterhead, the silence of God. The orphan simply updated the address on his envelopes and kept mailing the same letter. Please, if it's not too much, whenever you get a chance. And then, somewhere in his 30s or his 50s or last Tuesday at 2 a.m., the orphan discovered spirituality. And this is the part the sleeping world will never see about itself. So listen closely. The orphan did not wake up when he found these teachings. He redecorated. He took the same envelope, the same plea, the same upturned face, and he learned a prettier vocabulary for it. He stopped saying, "Please, God," and started saying, "I am open to receiving." He stopped begging the landlord and started begging the cosmos. He wrote his desires 33 times in a notebook, which is simply asking 33 times instead of once. He watched the sky for signs, which is refreshing an inbox. He called his waiting divine timing, which is the most beautiful excuse ever invented for a package that was never shipped. Scripting, angel numbers, full moons, frequencies he had to earn like a wage, new robes, same gallery, same folded hands. The invisible prison has a gift shop, and it sells exactly this. Spiritualized begging, asking with better production values. The architecture doesn't care what language you plead in. Pleading is pleading. The signal underneath is identical, and the mirror only ever reads the signal. The authority is elsewhere. The authority is elsewhere. The authority is elsewhere. Now ask the colder question, the one this manuscript exists to ask. Why does he stay? The orphan is not stupid. Some part of him has noticed that decades of asking produced decades of waiting. So why does he keep the posture? What is he getting paid? He is getting paid in innocence. Because look at what the gallery offers that the bench never can. If the authority is elsewhere, then the outcome is elsewhere too. If someone else holds the gavel, then the sentence is never your fault. The orphan's poverty is something that happened to him. His loneliness is a delay in processing. His entire life is a case pending in a court he cannot influence. And there is a terrible, warm comfort in that. The comfort of the passenger who never has to look at the road. To take the bench is to lose that comfort forever. To take the bench is to admit that the file on your life has your handwriting on every page. A philosopher in occupied Paris gave this maneuver its true name. He called it bad faith. Not weak faith. Bad faith, the specific lie a mind tells itself about its own freedom. And he defined it with the precision of a scalpel. Read that again. The deceiver and the deceived are the same person, which means the orphan, somewhere beneath the folded hands, already knows. He knows the bench is empty. He knows the asking is theater. He performs helplessness for an audience of one, and the audience applauds, because the alternative is a responsibility so total, it feels like standing at the edge of the void with no railing. You know this vertigo. You felt a flicker of it 3 minutes ago, when the innocence was named. That flicker is the most honest thing in you. And Neville, decades earlier, had already caught the orphan's favorite prayer in 4 words and shown it to be a confession. The orphan loves the future tense. I will be wealthy. It will come. It's on its way. Listen to what the future tense actually swears under oath. Every someday is a signed affidavit of not now. Every it's coming notarizes the distance. The orphan's hope is the prison's strongest wall, because hope, held this way, is just asking stretched across time. It keeps the case open forever, and an open case never pays out. So there he kneels, innocent, hopeful, waiting, deceiving a deceiver who is himself, a god in witness protection from his own name. That is the first figure. Now stand up and walk with me past the railing, up the 3 wooden steps the gallery is trained never to climb. It is time to look at the second figure, the one whose seat this always was. Chapter 4. The bench was always yours. From up here, the room looks different. The gallery you spent your life in is smaller than it felt. The bench is just wood and old varnish under your palms. There's a faint smell of dust and paper, the smell of every record ever kept on you. And on the desk, 1 gavel, 1 blotter, 1 lamp with a green shade burning at the edge of its own small light. No throne, no lightning. Authority never looks like the movies. It looks like a desk where the decisions are actually made. Now learn what the word itself has been trying to tell you all along. Authority, from the Latin auctor. And auctor does not mean ruler or master or boss. It means author, the one who originates, the one who writes. The language remembered what you forgot. To have authority over a thing is not to dominate it. It is to be the one writing it. And you have been the author of every page of your file since the first breath. Which means the question was never whether you would sit on the bench. You have never once left it. The orphan is not a person who lacks the seat. The orphan is the author, writing a character who kneels. Sit with the mechanics of that. Because this is where the manual stops being poetry and becomes engineering. In the 1950s, a fussy Oxford philosopher named J.L. Austin noticed something about language that broke the field in half. He noticed that some sentences don't describe reality at all. They perform it. They do the thing they say, in the saying of it. A judge says, "I sentence you to 10 years," and the words are not a report about the sentence. The words are the sentence. A captain says, "I name this ship," and the ship is named. Austin called the courtroom kind verdictives, rulings, findings, the speech of the bench. And he attached one condition to all of them, one law of felicity that decides whether the utterance lands or dies in the air. The speaker must hold the authority. A spectator in the gallery can shout 10 years until his voice tears, and nothing in the universe moves. The same 4 words from the bench redirect the entire machinery of the state. Identical sounds, identical grammar. The only difference is the seat they are spoken from. Now bring that law inside, where it was always pointing. In the republic of your own consciousness, there is exactly one seat of authority, and it is occupied permanently by you. Not the you on your driver's license, the one behind the eyes reading this room right now. The awareness that says I am before any word gets attached to it. In here, you are not a citizen petitioning the court. In here, there is no other officer. Every state you have ever declared from that seat has been executed without appeal, including the terrible ones. I am unlucky was a verdict. I am always broke was a verdict. Things never work out for me, read once with total conviction at 19 and never overturned, has been enforced by the full machinery of the gray architecture ever since. You have proof of the mechanism. Your life is the proof. You're not a person who has never issued a binding ruling. You are a judge who has been sentencing himself for decades and calling it a personality. And the world outside the courtroom? The bills, the bodies, the traffic, the faces. The manual has told you what they are. The delayed echo. The mirror is not instantaneous. The physical world is consciousness arriving late, the light of a star that left its surface years ago. What you are walking through today is the enforcement of old verdicts, rulings you issued so long ago you have forgotten your own signature on them. Reality is not resisting you. Reality is obeying a previous you. That is why it never needed convincing. That is why every negotiation failed. You cannot persuade an echo. You cannot romance a mirror into a better reflection. The architecture complies, has only ever complied, not because it was won over, but because it was never asked in the first place. It has no ears for requests. It has no opinion to change. It is a vast, perfect, indifferent clerk that executes whatever the bench declares and files the paperwork in flesh and circumstance. William James, the father of American psychology, watched this law operate in human lives and wrote down the finding in a single line his century wasn't ready for. A claim, not a wish, not an application. James chose the word of a landowner, walking his own boundary, the word of someone collecting what is already titled to him. Faith, in the only mechanics that matter, is not hoping the powers say yes. It is presenting the deed. So here is the state of the room at the end of this chapter. The bench is yours. It was always yours. The gavel has your fingerprints on it and no one else's. And the gallery behind you is empty. And it was always empty. And the judge you were begging was your own shadow thrown huge against the back wall by one green-shaded lamp. Which leaves one problem. A judge is nothing without a case. And this is where nearly everyone who ever glimpsed this power destroyed it in the next breath. Because they dragged the wrong defendant into the dock. They put the desire on trial. The money, the lover, the healed body. They ruled on the surface and left the foundation untouched, and the foundation quietly overruled them by morning. You will not make that mistake, because before you read your verdict, you are going to learn what is actually standing trial tonight. It is not what you want. It never was. Chapter 5, The Case. Every failed manifestation in your life failed for the same reason. Wrong defendant. You wanted money, so you ruled on money. You wanted love, so you ruled on love. You stood the desire in the dock, declared it granted, and went to bed satisfied. And by morning, the old life had reassembled itself around you like water closing over a stone. And you took that as proof the power wasn't real. It was proof the power is absolute. You just aimed it at a symptom, understand what a desire actually is. A desire is not a thing. A desire is a symptom of a ruling already in force. You do not crave water in a place with no drought. The wanting of money is not about money. It is the felt pressure of an older verdict, still enforced, still active, humming under your life like the fluorescent light you stopped hearing years ago. Some version of provision comes from elsewhere. Some version of there is never enough for me. Ruled once, long ago, by a younger judge with your face, and upheld every day since by the only court that exists. So when you declare money comes to me easily on top of a standing verdict of there is never enough, you have not overruled anything. You have hung a painting over a crack in a load-bearing wall. The architecture does not enforce the painting. It enforces the wall. This is why the teachers you outgrew kept you busy with surfaces, lists of desires, boards of pictures, 90-day goals. All of it litigation about furniture while the foundation ruling stood unchallenged in the record. The gift shop of the invisible prison will sell you 1,000 cases about what you want, and not one about what you assume. Because the day you rule on an assumption, you stop being a customer. So tonight, you learn to read your own file. The skill is called naming the case, and it is simple, and it will cost you something because the case is always deeper than the wish and closer to the bone. Here's the procedure. Take the desire, any desire, the one that has survived every disappointment, the one you are almost embarrassed still lives in you. Now do not ask, how do I get this? That is gallery thinking, the orphan's only question. Ask the bench's question instead. What must I have already ruled true for this to still be missing? Sit inside that question and feel the floor open. The man who has begged for wealth for 20 years follows it down and finds the actual defendant. And it is never money. It is a sentence. I am someone who struggles. The woman who has scripted a soulmate through 4 notebooks follows it down and finds hers. I am someone who gets left. The one praying over the diagnosis finds the oldest verdict of all, laid down in childhood in a single overheard conversation. I am fragile. I am the one bad things find. Feel how different that is from a desire. A desire flutters. A case sits in your chest with the density of a stone you have carried so long your posture grew around it. When you name the true case, your body confirms it before your mind can object. Something in your stomach drops. The room gets 1 degree quieter. That drop is the sound of the real defendant standing up. And notice, before we go further, what these standing verdicts all have in common. Not one of them is a fact. Every single one was an assumption spoken by a child or a wounded younger self, that the mirror then made true through decades of faithful enforcement. Neville stated the mechanism without decoration. An assumption, though false, if persisted in, hardens into fact. Hardens into fact. Not as fact. Your entire biography is hardened assumption, poured like concrete around rulings you no longer remember issuing. Which is the most vicious sentence in this manuscript, and also the most merciful. Because what hardened from a word can be dissolved by a word, if the word comes from the bench. One warning before we enter the final chamber of this chapter, and it matters more than everything else in this section. When you find your case, the orphan in you will immediately try to argue it. He will want to gather evidence against the old belief, to debate it, to prove it wrong with affirmations, to fight. Do not let him. The moment you argue with a verdict, you have recognized its authority. Defense attorneys argue. Defendants plead. Judges neither argue nor plead. A judge reviews the record, finds the old ruling in error and vacates it, flatly, without drama. The way an adult removes a crayon law written on the wall by a child, not by debating the child, but by simply outranking him. You outrank him. You have always outranked him. The file is open on the desk now. The defendant has a name, and the name is not money, and it is not love, and it is not health. It is a sentence in your own handwriting, decades old, still in force. There's exactly one thing left to do with it. Chapter 6. The verdict. The artifact. What you receive now is the artifact of this chapter. Not a technique, not a ritual. A single act of state, performed once and understood before it is performed, because a verdict issued in confusion is not a verdict. So first, the anatomy of the word itself. Verdict, from the Latin veredictum, truly said, not loudly said, not repeatedly said, not hopefully said. Truly said, the truth, spoken once by the one with authority to speak it, in the presence of the record. That is the entire practice. Everything else in this chapter is only the removal of what you would otherwise add to it. Because here is what you must understand before your mouth opens. The orphan cannot do this practice. He will try to do it his way, and his way has 3 fingerprints, and any one of them voids the ruling. Repetition, emotion as persuasion, and checking. Take them one at a time, slowly, because your freedom lives in these distinctions. Repetition. An affirmation is a sentence you say many times, hoping that volume becomes belief. Feel the confession hiding inside that. Why would truth need to be repeated? You do not remind yourself daily that fire is hot. You do not affirm your own name in the mirror each morning, 3 sets of 10, to keep it from expiring. A thing said 500 times is a thing not yet believed, and the mirror does not reflect the words. The mirror reflects the not yet. A judge who read the same ruling every morning would be removed from the bench by lunch because everyone in the room would understand what the repetition meant. He does not believe his own authority. Emotion as persuasion. The orphan believes he must feel his way into worthiness, must generate ecstasy, must vibrate at the frequency of the wish like a supplicant working himself into a trance the gods might notice. But watch an actual verdict being read in any courtroom on this planet. The judge's voice is the flattest sound in the room. No pleading in it, no performance. The power is not in the passion. The power is in the seat. Calm is not the absence of faith. Calm is what faith sounds like when it has stopped auditioning. There is a feeling that belongs here, but it is not excitement. It is the feeling that follows a thing already settled. The quiet in the chest after the pen lifts. Relief without celebration. The scene is not, may it come. The scene is, it is done, and I was there when it was signed. And checking. The 3rd fingerprint, the one that undid you that night in your bed. The glance upward in the last 3 seconds. Did it take? Understand this with total finality. A ruling that is monitored for compliance was never a ruling. The checking is the appeal. The checking reopens the case in the very instant it closes, files the outcome back under pending, and hands the gavel to the ceiling. A judge does not follow the prisoner to the prison. He does not call the warden nightly. He reads the sentence, closes the file, and the entire machinery of the state moves because he does not look up to see whether it will. The book your grandmother owned said exactly this, in a verse read 1 billion times and obeyed almost never. Believe that ye receive. Past tense inside the present moment. Not believe that ye shall receive if the paperwork clears. The receiving happens at the reading, in the courtroom of consciousness, and the outer delivery is the delayed echo doing what echoes do, arriving after the sound that caused them, obedient and late. Now, The procedure itself. 3 movements. Listen to all 3 before you attempt any of them, because this is done once, and once means once. First movement. Name the case, aloud or in writing, in the cold language of the record. Not "I want to stop feeling poor." That is the gallery's grammar. The record reads, in the matter of the assumption that provision must come from elsewhere, ruled true by a prior court, under review. Feel the difference in your spine. You are not confessing a weakness. You are a higher court, reviewing an error. Second movement. Take the seat. This is not visualization as you learned it. Do not imagine a courtroom if the image distracts. The seat is a posture of consciousness, and you have felt it before in small moments you never named. The moment you finally ended a relationship you had agonized over for a year, and the agonizing simply stopped, not because the pain was gone, but because the question was. The moment you quit the job, signed the paper, said the unsayable thing. That specific interior click when a matter moves from open to closed. Find that click in your memory. Sit in the place it comes from. That place is the bench. You are not there to be believed. Belief is what defendants need. You are there to rule. Third movement. Read the verdict. Once. Present tense, first person, flat as a foundation stone. The prior ruling is vacated. I am the source of my provision. So it is entered. Or in your own words, provided they contain no future, no plea, no if. Speak it the way you would state your own name to someone who asked. Then, and this is the entire artifact, close the file. Close it. Put the pen down. Stand up from the table physically if a body helps you mean it. And do not look back at the page. Not tonight to savor it. Not tomorrow to strengthen it. Not next week to check the tracking number on it. The case does not exist anymore. There is nothing to strengthen because it is not a plant you are growing. It is a law you have passed. And there is nothing to check because the glance itself is the only thing in the universe with the authority to overturn you. No one else can appeal your verdict. No parent, no bank, no diagnosis, no God of your childhood. The gray architecture has no appellate court. Only one being in existence can reopen the case. The judge returning to the file at 2 a.m. just to make sure. So when the urge comes, and it will come, sometimes within the hour, you will feel it as an itch behind the sternum, a pull toward the drawer where the file sleeps. Understand what the urge is. It is not doubt attacking from outside. It is the old man, the deposed judge, the orphan in his last costume, reaching for the gavel you took from him. And you will meet him properly in the next chapter, because his counterattack deserves its own file. But in this moment, there is only this. Somewhere in you, tonight or this week, in a quiet room with a closed door, one old sentence is going to be read for the last time. And one new sentence is going to be read for the first and only time. And the fluorescent hum of the world will not change when you speak it. The water stain will still be on the ceiling. The phone will still be face down. The echo is delayed. That is its nature, not its verdict on you. But in the only courtroom that has ever existed, a gavel will have come down. And everything is already obeying. Chapter 7. The Backlash. The old man. Do not mistake what happens next for failure. Within an hour of reading your verdict, or within a day, or at 2 a.m., when the house has gone quiet enough to hear your own blood, something in you will begin to scream. Not loudly. Worse than loudly. It will scream in the voice of reasonableness. You should read it again, just once, just to be sure it took. Meet the old man. He is not a demon. He is not some enemy planted in you by the architecture. He is the deposed judge. The orphan you retired in one sentence, and he has held your gavel for so many decades that his hand still curls in its shape while he sleeps. Every ruling in your old file bears his signature. Your smallness was his life's work. And tonight, for the first time since your childhood, he woke up unemployed. Understand him, because you cannot rule a court you don't understand. The old man is not trying to destroy you. He is trying to save you, using the only map he owns, a map drawn when you were 4 years old, and the supply really was elsewhere. To him, your verdict is not liberation. It is a child grabbing the wheel. Asking kept you fed. Waiting kept you safe. Smallness kept you loved, or at least kept you from being noticed by whatever notices the proud. His panic is loyalty. Ancient, obsolete, devoted loyalty to a world that no longer exists. And the science of the sleeping world, in one of its rare honest moments, confirmed his nature. Researchers spent 50 years studying helplessness, and at the end of it, the two men who founded the field admitted they had read their own data backwards. Passivity is not learned, they wrote. Passivity is the default. The mammal brain assumes helplessness the way a house assumes darkness. What has to be learned, wired in, fought for, is control. Which means the old man is not your weakness. He is your factory setting. And a verdict, one real verdict, is the first act that has ever overwritten him. So he will counterattack. And his campaign has 3 fronts. Learn them now, in the light, so you recognize them later, in the dark. The first front is the itch, the pull toward the file. It will dress itself as diligence, as devotion, as just reinforcing the work. You will find your hand reaching for the notebook, your mind reaching for the scene. One more read, one more rehearsal. Hold the line. You know what rereading is now. A verdict reread tomorrow was never a verdict. It was a request wearing one's clothes. When the itch comes, you do not fight it, and you do not obey it. You name it. The old man wants the gavel. Then you go wash a dish. Authority does not hover over its own signature. The second front is the mouth. Within days you will feel a nearly chemical urge to tell someone. A friend, a partner, a stranger in a comment section. It will feel like enthusiasm. It is extradition. The old man cannot reopen your case, so he will try to move it to a court where he still has friends. The court of other people's faces. Watch what you are actually doing when you announce a ruling still traveling through the echo. You are holding up the drawing again, watching the parent's face again, outsourcing the bench to an audience. The old kings sealed their decrees. They did not read them aloud in the marketplace to be voted on. Your verdict is sealed. Silence is not secrecy. Silence is jurisdiction. The third front is the cruelest, because the old man does not run it alone. The world itself will appear to join him. Understand the mechanics before it happens, or it will break you. The echo is delayed, which means the days and weeks after your verdict are, by law, furnished entirely with deliveries from the old regime. Bills postmarked before your ruling. Rejections that left the warehouse months ago. The same water stain, the same face-down phone. The old man will stand in the gallery pointing at every one of them, screaming his only scripture. Look, nothing changed. Who do you think you are? And there it is, his final weapon, and the oldest question in the invisible prison. Every warden of the gray architecture, outer and inner, eventually asks it. Who do you think you are? Your teachers asked it with their eyes. Your church asked it with its ceilings. And now the last warden asks it from the front row of your own courtroom, certain, as he has always been certain, that the question has no answer. But tonight, it has one. A man who spent 5 years in prison camps and occupied streets, who watched human beings hand their freedom away with both hands just to escape the weight of it, wrote the answer down in 1943 in the middle of the catastrophe, with the calm of a coroner. Condemned. Sartre chose a courtroom word, and he chose it precisely. Your authority is not a reward you earned or a rank you might lose. It is a sentence. You cannot resign from the bench. You never could. Even your decades of kneeling were rulings, verdicts of smallness issued from the very seat you swore was empty. The old man's question answers itself the moment it is heard clearly. Who do you think you are? The one the question is addressed to. The one who was always deciding, even when the decision was to kneel. So when he rises in the gallery, pointing at the unchanged room, you do not argue with him. Judges do not argue. You look at him the way you would look at a man waving an expired warrant, with something that is almost tenderness, because he carried you as far as kneeling could carry anyone. And you say the only thing a standing court ever says to a vacated one. The ruling stands. 3 words. Flat as the first ones. Not a defense. A citation of the record. And each time you say them, in the supermarket, in the dark, in the long, unchanged meantime, the wiring the researchers wrote about is laid down a little deeper, and the default dims a little further, and the old man's chair in the gallery sits a little emptier. He will not die tonight. He took decades to build, and he will take his time to leave. But he will never hold the gavel again, because now you know his face, and a warden who has been seen is already halfway to being a ghost. Chapter 8, Walking Out. So this is where the chapter leaves you. Not on a mountaintop. In a hallway, holding a closed file, in front of doors that were never locked. Notice what you do not feel. You do not feel euphoric. Good. Euphoria is the gallery's currency, the rush of a petitioner who thinks the desk upstairs smiled at him. What sits in your chest instead is heavier and far more valuable. The specific gravity of a settled thing. The quiet after the pen lifts. If you feel almost nothing except a kind of cold, clean stillness, you have done this correctly. Peace is what power feels like from the inside. It never feels like fireworks. It feels like the absence of the question. And notice what the world will look like tomorrow. Identical. The fluorescent lights will hum in the same key. Gravity will lean on you at the same weight. The phone, the bills, the stain on the ceiling, all of it delivered on schedule from the old regime. Because the echo honors its delays. You now know what almost no one walking past you knows. The unchanged room is not evidence against the verdict. The unchanged room is the old verdict, finishing its sentence. Let it finish. You are not waiting, because waiting is watching, and watching is checking. And you have retired from all 3. There is a difference the sleeping world cannot see between waiting for a thing and simply living in the time before its arrival. The first is the orphan at the mailbox. The second is the operant power, mid-stride, already spending the inheritance in the only ledger that counts. Walk through the days as the ruling, not the ruled. When the money question rises, you do not reach for the file. When the loneliness leans in at midnight, you do not draft a new petition. You cite the record. That case is closed. And slowly, on a schedule that is none of your business, the deliveries change. Not because you were finally convincing, because the warehouse only ever ships what the bench has signed, and the bench has a new signature now. This was one chapter of the manual. One wall of the invisible prison, the wall called asking. And tonight, You put a door in it. But the prison has other walls, older ones. The wall of the borrowed self, where the old man keeps his archives. The wall of time, where the echo hides its machinery. The manual takes them down one by one, in order, the way this one came down. If you walked out of a wall tonight, stay for the next demolition. The next chapter is already open on the desk, and the lamp is still on. And if the verdict was read tonight, in that quiet room with the closed door, leave 3 words below this recording, for no one's approval and to no court but your own. The ruling stands, not as proof, as a signature in the margin of a book that thousands are reading alone, in the dark, each one certain they are the only one awake. They are not. You are not. You entered this world screaming, small, fragile, limited, born into a conspiracy of silence. And the conspiracy held for as long as it needed to. It taught you to raise your hand. It taught you to fold them. It taught you the upturned face, the pleas, the glance at the ceiling. And then one night, in a bed you thought was a dead end, it delivered you here, to a manuscript that told you what the silence had been hiding. Nothing above you was ever listening, because nothing above you exists. There is the mirror, and there is the bench, and there is you, condemned to be free, seated whether you kneel or not, ruling whether you whisper or decree. So decree, once, flatly, finally. And then put down the gavel, walk out into the unchanged morning, past the sleeping faces and the fluorescent hum, carrying the one thing no architecture can confiscate. The verdict is in.
The recording ends here. What happens next does not. Somewhere tonight, in a quiet room, an old sentence will be read for the last time, and a new one will be read once and never again. If that room is yours, leave 3 words below this recording. The ruling stands, not for approval, as a signature. Thousands are reading this manual alone, in the dark, each one certain they are the only one awake. The signatures in the margin say otherwise. The complete manuscripts live in one archive, mindhavenaudio.cloud. The full books, the ones this channel reads from, are kept there. The transmissions also continue on Facebook and on Spotify for nights when the screen is too loud and only a voice will do. Follow there, and the manual travels with you. Follow there, and the manual travels with you. This was one wall of the invisible prison. The manual continues, and the next wall is older than this one. Subscribe, and the next chapter will find you when it opens. The lamp is still on, court is adjourned.